So you've tried a couple of recipes that you found online or on YouTube for chicken fried steak, and you found out that they didn't stay crispy. And in fact, some of them never even got crispy to begin with. And you're wondering, what's the secret to keeping the crust crispy? Well, I'll get back to that here in a few minutes, but first I want to go over a couple things. Actually, no, that's not how I do things on this channel. The answer is saltine crackers. You break them down into a mixture of crumbs and shards, and that's the last step of the breading process. And these will stay crispy throughout the process, and they'll remain crispy while you're making the gravy too. Well, I did that a little bit differently than most YouTubers do. In fact, I hate it when I click on a video and they just don't answer the question that I had when I clicked the video. Instead, they just drag ass to get their view time up. I think that's disrespectful to the viewer. If you want more of their time, provide something of value to them. So if you're looking for a cooking channel that's more authentic, that doesn't do dumb shit like that, consider subscribing to this channel. But for now, let's make some chicken fried steak. Okay, the first thing we need to go over here is what cut of steak is used to make chicken fried steaks. And the answer to that would be cube steaks. These are the ones that kind of look like a hamburger, but they also kind of look like a steak that's been run over by a lawnmower or a truck. And these things are steaks that are cut from the round primal section. So they're round steaks. And then they're pounded out with a meat mallet to tenderize them. And obviously you could make a cube steak yourself by putting one of these round steaks in between a few layers of plastic wrap or in between the layers of a freezer bag and pounding it out yourself, but I'm gonna be using the pre-made ones today. And by the way, there are also pork cube steaks, and those make awesome chicken fried pork steaks, I guess you could call them too, and they're a fraction of the price. So if this is a little out of your budget, try pork. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do here is split a few of these in half, and the only reason I'm doing this is so they can fit in the pan a little bit better, so you could skip this step depending on your pan and how many you want to cook. Pieces that are a bit more elongated conform better to most circular pans, but moving forward from that, the next step is to season both sides with salt and pepper, and some people skip this step and either season the breading mixture or they season them after they are done cooking, but neither of those result in much of the seasoning reaching the meat itself, so this is the best way to do it. And once you've got a few of these things seasoned up, the next step is to build the breading station, and that's going to start with a seasoned flour mixture. So for that, combine 1 cup of all-purpose flour with 1 teaspoon of paprika, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1/2 teaspoon of oregano, and 1/2 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Give that a good stir to combine the ingredients, and take a few seconds on this to make sure everything is distributed evenly throughout. Then empty the mixing bowl onto a plate or a tray, and just make sure that it's sprawled out enough to comfortably fit the steaks onto it. So with that aside, the next step is to get our crackers ready. So pull 1 full sleeve out of the box, and rather than just eating the crackers, empty the whole thing into a food processor. And you want to be careful here and use the pulse button instead of fully turning it on and just letting it run. The pulse button allows for a bit more control because we don't want to completely pulverize the crackers into a dust or a powder. You actually want a good portion of them to remain relatively coarse. The finer particles are going to fill in the smaller gaps during breading, and the larger ones are going to contribute to that crispy, craggly crust that we want. And I'd say these are looking pretty good right here, so same as with the flour, go ahead and empty them onto a plate, and god damn it, I'm trying to make it look like I know what the fuck I'm doing here. The blade stays in the processor and the crackers are supposed to come out, so let's try this again and not look like a dumbass while doing it. It's a simple fucking task, Justin. Jesus Christ, man, get it right. And with that, I've also whisked together 2 eggs with 1 ounce of buttermilk off camera, and that's going to set up a workstation that's known as the standard breading procedure. And the first step of this procedure is to lightly dust the surface of the food with flour, then shake off the excess before placing it into the egg wash mixture, and make sure to get the whole steak completely coated here before allowing the excess to come off here as well. And then the final step is to coat the steak with our saltine crackers. I like to slightly press down on them as well because that will help the breading adhere to the meat a little bit better. And another thing I want to point out here is that I'm also using a wet hand, dry hand technique while doing this, and that's a little trick used in restaurants to prevent your hands from getting all caked up with the breading. So all of the flour and cracker stuff is being done with my left hand, and all of the egg stuff is being done with my right hand. And it actually helps me to set the plates up accordingly to this as well. And this technique especially helps in restaurants when you have to bread up a shitload of these things. It's not as big of a deal if you're only breading 2 or 3 of them, but it still does help. So with these ready to go, let's head over to the stove top and place a larger saute pan over medium heat, and once that heats up, add a decent amount of oil to the pan. And to cook these steaks, we're going to use a technique that's known as pan frying, which uses a moderate amount of oil over a moderate amount of heat. This is unlike sauteing, which uses a smaller amount of oil and higher heat. With sauteing, the goal is to sear the surface of the food, and it's done with intense heat, and the food will be clearly, visibly, and audibly sizzling. With pan frying, on the other hand, the bubbling around the food will be less intense, and this is going to result in the food browning up gradually and more evenly. The breading will burn and turn bitter if the heat is cranked up too high. So once the steaks have a crispy golden brown crust on both sides, we can drop them into the oven below, and I've got that preheated to 250 degrees, and I've got a sheet tray ready to go that I've lined with a wire rack too, and this is going to help the bottom of these steaks remain crispy. And now we can turn our attention to our gravy. So after discarding the remaining oil in the pan, drop in 2 tablespoons of butter along with 1 ounce of flour to make a mixture known as roux. Whisk this together and lightly toast it over medium heat, and then don't do what I did here. I was a little asleep at the wheel and added the milk all at once, and I've said multiple times on this channel to gradually add liquids to roux to avoid the formation of lumps. So now my only option is to whisk the hell out of it to get these things out. So after working all of the lumps out, I can add 8 ounces of chicken stock in addition to the 8 ounces of milk that I've already added. And you can clearly see the challenges brought about by not doing this right. It becomes very hard to not only get the lumps out, but also to get the whole thing to become one cohesive unit. It can get there, it's just going to involve a lot of vigorous and tedious whisking. Now once you do get there, season the gravy with salt and of course a lot of black pepper, and bring it to a boil to fully thicken the sauce and to cook out any raw flour taste remaining. Now once the gravy comes to a full boil and you've allowed it to simmer for a few minutes afterwards, adjust the seasonings as needed, then we can take the steaks out of the oven and get ready to plate this whole thing up. So let's go ahead and shift the lights and cameras to the opposite side of the kitchen where I have a plate set up, and I've prepared a few sides while you weren't looking as well. I made some mashed potatoes and green beans, and I will include a link to the filmed versions of these recipes in the description, and in that particular video it also includes a great meatloaf recipe, so I would definitely check that one out. So once you get all of your sides plated up, follow that up by shingling a few of our crispy chicken fried steaks on the opposite side of the plate, and finally finish the whole thing off with some of that rich country gravy. And be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know what you think of the recipe in the comments. But for now, that's the end of the video, so as always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.